This is Reese, and you're watching Thorin season, and I would have been better than forgiven if I wouldn't get injured.
Right, this is going to be another episode of Reflections, and my guest for this one is going to be Inspired, who is obviously a Polish jungler who was the MVP of the LEC, he was the MVP of the LCS, he played for Rogue mainly in the LEC, and then he played primarily for Evil Geniuses in the LCS, but he currently plays in the LCS for FlyQuest. So Inspired, the place I'm going to start this interview is... when I look up on the old Gamepedia or those wikis out there and you look up people's careers and, you know, who were they playing with, normally I'm usually just looking for stuff like, did you play with a famous player I know, or like some cool connection maybe no one knows. On yours, the thing I want to start with is you were really just some like 15-year-old phenom player just playing with all these players. So people don't know you actually played with people like Aggressivo who've been in, like he was on Misfits, so people don't remember. Some of these people have been in the LEC. You were like a 15-year-old stud at like it looks like at the semi-pro level, isn't it? Sort of like at the top Polish level.
Yep. I mean, I started basically getting scouted by one of the Polish players. Like my friend Kacper, back then he was a pro player. He like found me in solo queue and said he's just playing like a Polish Cup and he's like getting pretty good there, and he's looking for a jungler if I want to play with him. And that's basically how I did my like first steps into screaming with the team and like finding out how is it even to be playing on the team. And from that on, I think I just got higher rank in solo queue, and like European people got more interested in me as well. Like at the beginning, it was just Polish people.
Because one thing I actually saw was quite cool about your career when I look at this early period is because there's been at different times so many Polish players in the LEC, you actually had a bunch of people who'd already been in. You had people like Nick and stuff like that. People don't know, but obviously some of the really old ones like Pookie style, like people who actually are pretty well known in the Polish scene. Did you actually get like anything from playing with these players that were they able to give you any experience or some sense of what it's like to be pro?
I mean, for sure. I mean, I played with NIQ on the team. I played with Pookie on the team at my early days. And I think I just, I mean, the biggest thing was that I got to experience like playing with the people that you were watching at. Like
right.
before I became a pro, I was just watching them play. So there's a kind of new experience for me that now I'm actually on their team and I'm playing with them. And it helped me really a lot when I started playing with VandeR, because then I didn't feel that it was something new to me already, because I experienced with Pookie, with NIQ, like I knew those people from before, so I kind of got used to playing with the people that I was watching on the screen. So when I first time played with VandeR, it wasn't really something like a fanboy moment. I was like already kind of used to like, okay, I think I'm getting good. I can start playing with the good players now. So when I played with VandeR, it was like obviously way bigger because he was like really good at the time. Like he was at Worlds and stuff like that. But I wasn't fanboying him too hard. I was just like, yeah, we are teammates now. Let's work together.
Okay, one thing people might know, especially if they watched any of my content, is because I come from Counter-Strike, and obviously we had some very, very famous Polish players in Counter-Strike. I will admit, it's made me a bit biased, like, knowing the way that their team operated, it makes me think, because some of the stories I've heard, maybe other Polish teams are like this. Like, if people don't know, the joke is, you've been in the LCS now, Inspired, like, you could never take any of these players and just drop them in an LCS deal. I'm telling you, like, VOD review would be over within 1 week, they'd be, like, suspended, they'd get warning, like... By the way, just essentially for what's like their way of discussing things, like arguing about things or blaming people in the game. Was it like this in your teams? Were people a bit spicy if things went wrong in the game?
I mean, yeah, but there was never like we were spicy, but there was never really anything personal. Like we knew that the goal is to get as good as a team, and even if opinions are different, we might argue in like a bit more aggressive way. I think in the end we always came to the conclusion and how we want to play, and no one really took it personal. I agree. I think this kind of talks would not work in like in LCS maybe, because here I think you have to be a little bit like nicer to each other, because people might think that you actually are trying to offend them instead of just trying to play for like greater good for like a great of the team. So yeah, I think definitely the way we're doing it with the Polish teams wouldn't really go through here.
Because one thing I did wonder about that will actually come up later in the interview, it's obviously a topic we're going to talk about, is in your career, I think your style has not only been influential over your teams, but it's been probably the main thing people potentially criticise you for, or do you demand too much resources, or that's... So before we get there, I just wanted to ask, in these sorts of teams when you were coming up and you're like the younger player and the one trying to play, were you actually someone who, were you confident in yourself? Like, would you, for example, would we, if we went to watch these games in whatever, like fucking whatever, it's actually before Ultra League, but if we went to watch these Polish tournaments, champions. Would I see Inspired a bit like he is now, like a person who's a big voice and gets what he wants, and people play around? Were you able to make demands?
No, for sure not. At the beginning, I was like really shaky on the stage. I like didn't really talk much. I think it just comes with the feel. Like when you are confident in the game, you just have this flow of the game. Like you know everything what's going around you, what everyone is doing on the map, what enemies are doing, what's your plan is, what the enemy plan is. And when you are a rookie, you kind of don't really have that, and you are just like really focused on yourself to not make mistakes yourself, and you can't look at the bigger picture. So at the beginning, that for sure was the way I was, but and also that's why I was playing more of the carry champions, because I think if you play like champions that your team used to rely on, like you play, let's say, Sejuani, Jarvan, like engage champions, I think then you have to have a very good idea of what's going on the game. If you are playing Graves, you just play your own game, and then you just do whatever you want. I think that's why usually rookie players are better on carry champions, because they are just more comfortable in it. And if you don't have that good awareness in the game, it's better to play something you're confident at.
Yes, and also obviously the follow-on thought is added, which is why if people notice, veteran junglers tend to actually be the ones who just permanently go on those champions because they know their team and where to go, etc. I'd say the obvious examples, Jankos' career, if people have seen it. Right. One thing I want to ask you about is there is actually early in your career, obviously it was on when you were on the Mouse Sports team, there was actually a few famous players you played for. Like, one, if people don't know, the joke is, I'll say, it was a player called gistick or whatever, but obviously the joke is he changed his name. It's Kaiser. It's the player who plays in Team Jenax now, and obviously was a champion of Mad Lions. Obviously played you actually in a final. Yeah, that's kind of cool. You got to play in an LEC final. Who was this guy when he was in LEC? Because when he was in this level, like below the LEC, because I feel like now, unfortunately at the moment, like as we record this interview, he's kind of still getting flamed with it. People think he's bad or whatever. Who was he when he was at this level?
I mean, it was his first split. I think when we played the mouse sports, he was like legit his first ever competitive experience, from what I remember. When I already like experienced it a little bit, as I said, on like Polish teams. So he was very new to it. He was very quiet. He almost didn't talk at all in game. But his mechanics were pretty good. I remember that he was like always really high challenger, and even though he was support main, he could play stuff like Zed or Talon mid.
Right.
So that was very impressive to me. I really like the support main that can play mechanical champions. So for sure he has to be good. And I liked playing with him. I think we had a good mix on mouse sports. I think our AD carry was talking a bit more in the bot lane, so Kaiser could like kind of fit in the team. And overall, I enjoyed my time there. I felt like we had a really, really good team. I think some stuff just went kind of unlucky in like EU Master that we performed. I think if we were a bit more lucky, I think maybe we would make it to the group stage, and who knows what would happen there.
And then I did want to ask about the mid laner of this team, which was obviously the German mid laner, Jenax, who was in SK Gaming. And I actually thought, by the way, when he was in SK Gaming, at least the first split, he had some good games. He actually looked like he was a prospect. What was this guy like to play with? Was he actually already known as like a hype talent or someone they were looking at?
Yeah, he was at that point, I think, from what I remember. But whenever I played with him, I felt like I knew that top lane might suit him better, because I didn't feel like he was that good at impacting the game. I feel like he was better at just playing his own game. So if you want to play your own game, I feel like top lane is just for you. I think in the mid lane you have to really try to focus on your whole team and make sure everyone is like connected to each other. And if you are playing top lane, you are just on an island and you are 1v1, and you just need to know your trade patterns and your matchups and what you want to play and what you want to do on the certain waves. So I feel like overall top lane just would suit him better, and in the end he did also up to top lane, so
fair play. Obviously, if people don't remember, the story of Rogue is actually really interesting, because everyone forgets the beginning part, which goes like this. Rogue was obviously one of the brand new orgs that came when they made the LEC, when they made it a franchise league. This was one of the orgs that got accepted. But in the first split, the one where you weren't playing, where you were down at the ERL level, actually the joke was their actual LEC team was one of the worst teams. It was losing most of the games. But the ERL team was actually really good, even though, yes, obviously, like, it didn't always have like the results maybe people wanted, because the lineup started to get taken apart piece by piece and it came up to the main team. But essentially they knew they had this crop of talent, I've heard, and that eventually like some of you players were always going to get moved up. Obviously they moved most of you up actually just after like the first split. It was in the summer, and then if people forget, already this team right out of the gate was good. Like I remember this was the one where in the playoffs you like shocked the world by beating the fucking Splice team, and it was like, what the hell, in like a best of 5 in the playoffs. So do you remember coming into the LEC like this? It seems like it must have been kind of a dream. You just walked in and suddenly the team was kind of good.
Yeah, I mean, the moment in Spring Split when we were already doing kind of good as a team, and we knew that our main team is not doing that great. Like we knew that it's very possible that we will get promoted, and
Right.
if team wants to make a swap, they will probably promote the whole team. And so even though we kind of choked at the Masters, I think it was still like best of one format in the group stage. So we basically went 1 and 2 in the group stage and we got eliminated instantly. We knew that at that point that we are gonna play LEC next year, so no one was really like too sad about it, and we just focused on learning as much as possible from the scrims. Like even when we were still in academy, I think we were helping G to practice for the playoffs in LEC, and we weren't doing too bad against them. Like we managed to win some games, and some of the games were pretty even. So we knew that we for sure have potential. And then once we got into LEC, I think our first weeks on stage were a little bit shaky, especially for me. I didn't feel that confident, but when the time went on and into the playoffs, I felt very confident. And that kind of showed on stage. I think we played very well against Splice, and against Schalke we had a very close series in my opinion. I think if we were a little bit more lucky, or if we did a little bit different drafts, I think there was a chance of us beating them. But yeah, we didn't manage to, and sadly, because we didn't have enough points, our season ended there. And even though Splice lost 3-0 to us in playoffs, they still managed to make Worlds and make a good run. So that was a bit sad, but I think it was, as you said, it was pretty good start for a rookie in LEC, especially that we are like mainly rookies, me, Finn, and Larssen.
And I feel like maybe it's just because Odoamne has been around so long, but I feel like people have done that thing in this team, by the way, where they like delete the old players. Like, I bet if you ask a random fan, they think that like Comp and Odoamne were there the whole time, whereas it's like they weren't. Like, obviously in this team, Finn was there. People don't remember at the time, actually. This was one of the years where Finn was like hyped as a prospect, and everyone knew he had this like sick one-trick Kled and could like play Aurelia or whatever. Obviously, he's a very, very different top laner to Odoamne. What was it like to play with this player? Because I felt like inspired. He got kind of feel like he was one of the players that people blamed in Rogue, but then I feel like when he went to Astralis, maybe he sort of like earned back people's respect, or Exceller, which I think he was in both. What do you think of playing with this player? It seems like quite an unusual type of top laner.
Yeah, he's very unusual. Like I felt like he was like, you could see that he's not experienced. Like he didn't really know many matchups. He was very confident on his own champions, and he had like a good idea on how he wants to play out the lanes, like with Kled, or he really likes to play Aatrox, Aurelia. Like he knew how to play these champions. But if you had to put him on the matchup that he plays against some experienced top laner like Odoamne, I didn't feel like he had a chance. But that's why we were kind of looking always to draft for him, like that he gets his champion in a confident matchup. And I think it just didn't work super well for us at the beginning. And then in one of the off seasons, I remember we told him, "Yo, Finn, we really think you should learn some new champion. Let's learn Gangplank." And then he put so much hours into Gangplank in that off season. And then when the new season started, he was like a Gangplank king, and we were picking Gangplank like so early in every draft. And it was going into the 2020 summer. 2020 summer is when he already practiced the Gangplank. We were like playing Gangplank every game pretty much when we could, and we finished first in the regular season, and we managed to lock Worlds before even playoffs started. So yeah, I think he's a hard worker, but you could just see that he didn't have enough experience on the champions that he was not confident at.
The funny thing is, as you say, this was obviously 2020 summer, was the split where basically the pattern that everyone knows of Rogue began. And the really weird thing about this pattern, mate, is even though the style of team that was losing the games was obviously different, and even the players changed, like Finn goes out and Antama goes out, then and then eventually even you go out and the same thing continued. Everyone remembers what happened is, like you just said there, in the regular season, Rogue was always the best or like second best, basically winning loads of the PO1s and looking really good, like looking really clean. And then you would go to the playoffs, and then in the playoffs, like, you know what everyone does who's a fan, they just go, you just say choke. They don't have, it's not really like nuance. They don't explain what you did wrong or what what went right. They just look you and say you're a top favourite, and then you don't win the league, and they go, you must have just choked, right? Do you actually think in this particular split, was this a bit of a choke? I mean, people might remember the upper bracket, Fnatic did that weird one where they had like the Lucian mid that kind of caught everyone off guard. In the lower bracket, to be fair, it was G2 you lost to. It's a pretty good fucking team. But what do you think? Was there some choke in this split?
No, I think that's actually like that split. I think it was a bad narrative because actually like we went first in the season and we thought what we were playing was good, but when the playoffs patch hit, like the Evelyn became really strong and we didn't really pick it up for the first week of playoffs, and Fnatic was like ahead of us. They just played AD mid with the Evelyn and they like legit won 2 games really fast, and then we were like out of momentum. We didn't know what we were practicing was just wrong. Should we like ban their champions? Should we try to adapt during the series? So they just kind of finished us 3-0. But then we had a really good week of practice. We picked up the same champion that we lost to, and we basically stomped Mad Lions. And then going into the series against G2, that was like we still felt like G2 is the strongest team, even though Fnatic I think beat them and already guaranteed the final. We still felt like G2 is the strongest team, and the games were like really close. We went into game 5 against them, and I think that was the time that Finn prepared his counter pick into Shen with Aatrox, but I think he didn't execute on it too well, and the game went pretty hard. Like even though Hans was winning his lane really hard. The game was really hard to play because obviously when Shen is winning lane and he can like perma pressure them up with the ult, we kind of froze and couldn't really do anything. So we lost that series, but yeah, no one was like, I mean, no one really felt like we choked. I think we played on our level. Like G2 was just better on that day. I think we pulled a really good fight. It wasn't like they demolished us or anything. So that split, I wouldn't say we choked. I think the 2021 Spring playoffs, I think in the final, especially against Mad Lions, that's when the choking begins.
We'll definitely come back to that. Don't worry, we will come back to that. We'll save that for a sec. Right, here's the question I have though, because it's actually a topical follow-up, which is one thing I do want to ask about is what you just said there, which is I also feel like that's a trend that Rogue had in all their teams as well, mate, which is like you say, one of the reasons why the team does awesome in the regular split is I wouldn't even just say it's like that you have a meta read. I'd say actually it looked always like Rogue had their own read. It looked like you guys had your champions that you wanted to play. And I've even heard when I've talked to all the different players and a bunch of analysts, I've heard that behind the scenes, actually, Freddie 122's vision for the game at the time was like you draft like winning lanes that get you ahead in the game. I mean, obviously for your style, it must have been awesome, right? You get everyone basically like early game, you get ahead. It's actually part of why later Rogues had the sort of Rogue time problem. It's like this point of the game was great, but then after that, you had to sort of, as a team, take over. But the question I would have is this, Inspired. It does feel like in some of these playoff problems, sometimes this was maybe an issue that like maybe was Freddie, was he a bit stubborn with his read on the meta? Did he just wait to sort of react to other teams? It feels like sometimes in the playoffs he's a step behind what the other teams do. I don't know what reason that could be. What would you say?
I mean, for sure we had a good read on the in the early season, as you said. I think we got Hansama on when his stocks were very low, like after the year of Misfits when he finished very low. And I still knew he's like probably one of the best bot laners in Europe. So we got him. I think no matter what champion we pick him, he was always doing really good in lane and just pushing the leads, even though we didn't really have to like help him too much. Larssen was always known for being a good laner, so Freddy knew that he just needs to pick him his comp for like either Azir that back then was like really strong at laning, or Oriana that is also really strong at laning, and Larssen would always do his job in 1v1 scenarios. And we prioritized like strong champions top lane like Renekton. Then later we picked up the Gangplank, but before that it was mostly like Renekton and stuff like that. And so that was good for best of ones. Like our mid was always on the scaling champ that could win his lane on his own. Hans was always doing great, and that's why it was kind of hard to beat us in best of ones. But then going to playoffs, I mean, the 2020, I think it was just like everyone, not only Freddy, was like, okay, I think what we are playing is working, just stick to it. And then Fnatic just hit us with something completely new, and we are like, oh, what now? So I wouldn't say it was like Freddy's fault. I think the whole team, if you are winning, obviously everyone is like, okay, let's keep doing this. I think it's working. But maybe it wasn't that great of an idea at that point. But yeah, I mean, that's how it ended up, I guess.
Right, I think one player we should talk about immediately, because it'll set the table for some of the other discussions, is obviously the mid laner Larssen. Because in your particular case, Inspired, I feel like this is where narratives sometimes are just too much like stories we tell ourselves to make us think we know what is going on, instead of like sometimes life's really complicated and messy and there's a million factors. It's not like just some fairy tale story. So what I would say is this: everyone's written the story like this, Inspired. Since you were obviously an MVP in both leagues, LCS and LEC, and you were really good in the LEC, and everyone said you were a top jungler, and people also said Larssen was a top mid laner and a really good player and they know he's really awesome, but then he won when you weren't there and you won when he wasn't there. They all want to make it like, right, right, these two players couldn't play together, or like, their styles didn't work. But what's weird about that Inspired is, I would just start here. You had all these million regular season games where you guys are all winning. Like, this is Europe jungle mid. If you were a trash jungle mid, surely every team would just attack that. Or if the real story of, Larssen just wants to only farm lane and you're too busy farming the map, then they'd gank him 24/7. So give me some thoughts. It can't be just as simple as that narrative, right? There must be more to it. Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously agree with you. I think we were a really good duo because Larssen knew how to win the lane on his own, and I was pretty good at controlling the game. So I think people saying that, let's say, I was farming too much and not helping him is kind of wrong. I think he was just doing good on his own, and I was making sure that he has like he has stage for himself to just play his own game. And I think we already talked about 2020. I think that split we just got really cheesed by Fnatic, and that's why we lost. And 2021, we should have won. I think me and Larssen were working well together. Larssen was playing a lot of different champs. I think I was playing very well that split. And same for the summer split. I think summer split playoffs we were doing pretty good, but I think it was similar situation 2020. Like Rise came up right before playoffs. And we were still kind of sticking to Azir because it was working for us in regular season. And then we played against Maldians. I remember Humanoid and Elyoya playing like Lee Sin Rise, running around the map, and the game was really hard. And then we played against Fnatic with Buipo and Niski, and they were also really active mid jungle, playing a lot of Rise and TF and roaming. So I think our meta read for playoffs there was also a bit off. I think as a duo, me and Larssen, I didn't really have any problems. I think we weren't like unmatched or anything. I think both of us had idea on how to win the game, and obviously Larssen liked to play his way. I like to be more controlled, and I think it worked well together. As you said, if it wouldn't work well together, we wouldn't win as many games. Like we were always finishing in at least top 3. It's not like we are guaranteed to win if we are good. Like even if you are good, you can lose games. It happens.
Yes. Another thing I would say is this. I also feel like when they describe it that way, Inspired, they make it sound like Larssen has no agency in the game. Like, look, I know people might think Swedes in general a bit more quiet, or like he should. They think in his case, I think they think he just doesn't talk and farms win. I can tell you if I'm talking to players, I heard like he was calling Trymbi when that player was in the team mid all the time. Like, I'm sure if he wanted to, he could call for a gank, right? He obviously in this scenario, I don't know if this is the case, but like I'll give a quick example. If people know the player Forgiven, where he was an ADC. He actually had an unusual mentality. A fan would think he must just 24/7 ask for the gank. He was the opposite. He actually would tell you, like, don't gank. I don't need you to. Basically, I'm okay in bot, so actually do something else around the map, like go gank top or get ahead on the camps or whatever. Was Larssen a bit like this? It feels like you kind of, like you're saying, like, I think you both understood each other.
Yeah, he was a little bit like that. I think he knew when he needs resources and when he doesn't need resources. Like he knew that if you give him resources, in some cases he would ask for it because he knew he will be able to push his lead. But if he just felt like his lead is not really that pushable, he will be like, right. Yeah, just do your stuff, guys. I'm fine. I'm gonna slowly get lead on my own, but I can't really use the advantage that you guys give me. So just do your stuff. I think I was pretty good at judging it, and. Yeah, overall, I never really had a problem that, for example, I know he's like disconnected from the game from us and dies to random ganks. This was never really a problem. I feel like he always knew that if we are not there, he needs to play accordingly and like play a little bit safer. If we are there, he would use us. So it was fun playing with him, honestly.
The one player I did want to ask about, though, is Hans Sama, because this is actually a player where I'll fully admit, like, I've probably repeated these things because it's just things you hear behind the scenes. Bizarrely, earlier in his career, what people used to say about Hans Sama Inspired is they actually used to say he was like a player that doesn't talk. And they used to say the problem, whereas I've heard in these teams, it's the opposite. Everyone tells me now who's played with him, he's like the dream ADC, like always talks, tells you all the info you need, he tells you when he wants to group, when he wants to fight. So I've actually heard as well that he's actually pretty demanding in lane. Like he wants to like win 2v2 lane all the time. He's not one of those guys who wants to support roaming 24/7. So I wondered in your case, was there any clash there? Like, I mean, you don't really seem that much like the jungler wants to be told to just come to someone's lane all the time. What was the dynamic between you and Hans Sama?
I think he was really good at telling his teammates what he needs to succeed, and like he was really good at planning first 15 minutes of the game. Like he knew on which wave he wants to fight, he knew on which wave he wants to base, on which wave he will want the jungler to come and dive enemies, stuff like that. So he was really good at it. I didn't really mind at all. Like his game planning around bot lane was always on point. But I think he just felt a bit lost like after 20 minutes when the games were even and he didn't manage to get his plan going through. Like if he didn't manage to get him ahead, I think he just didn't really know that much what to do because he still wants to do more. But if he's not ahead and he can't do more, he just didn't feel confident in the game. So I felt like that was maybe a mismatch between Larssen and Hans. I think Larssen was like, he was really fine going even and then playing team fights or getting small leads and then playing team fights. And Hans was the guy that wanted to finish game at 15 minutes. He wanted to kill enemy bot lane, wanted me and Larssen to be in his lane and then just kill enemies. And I think that's why right now he's working so well with Caps because Caps likes to play like that. I think Caps and Yike are really like flexible, and if Hans with Mickey want to push advantage, I think they're always there for them. And in our team, I think we were not always there for him. That's why some games we weren't able to like snowball well or push our leads.
By the way, what actually was it like to play in LEC with VandeR? Obviously, this was kind of almost the end of his time in LEC. He did play Misfits afterwards, but this is kind of when people still remember. Like, actually, at the time, people thought he was going to become sort of like some shot-calling captain figure and be in the league a long time, but in the end, it turned out trymbi was a pretty good replacement. What was it like to play with him in these first years?
I mean, it was nice. I wouldn't say I learned like so much from him. I think I just learned to be like more calm in the game and look on a bigger picture from him. I think he was always like he was not really like selfish about bot lane. He knew when he needs to roam. He knew when he needs to go back to his lane. He wouldn't like get dragged around the map too much. Like he knew when to say no to someone because he thinks something is bad to do. So that was like you could see that he has a lot of experience. So it was chill to play with him. I felt like we were always like in control in the game. Like it never really felt like he's disconnected from the game. Like he always will put his part and make sure that everyone knows what's going on. And yeah, that you could just see that he has experience. And I kind of tried to pick up from him like the fact that trying to get everyone on the same page in the game. I think that's what I was learning from him.
When years ago we did an episode with Dom of that show, The Crackdown, that we used to do, which was like our big show back then, you actually dropped like a piece of info that I remembered all these years later because I thought it was actually quite telling, even though maybe a fan wouldn't pick up on it. And it's kind of like what you've just said earlier about Hans Sama. You said about Odoamne, like you didn't just make it like, yeah, I went to play with him as a good player. You actually straight up said that you were the one who went and because he was another player whose stock was low because of the Schalke teams or whatever, you went and you looked and you rewatched all his games and you told Rogue yourself, like, we should just get this guy. You've just said earlier as well, like you were also the guy who was like, similar thing, we should get Hans Sam, like you watched them. If people don't know, it's quite rare that pro players watch other players or scout like that. I'd say normally maybe it's like the other way around. Like maybe the GM asks you, what do you think of this guy? And then you just, you remember some solo queue games or time you played him. You were actually a guy sort of actively trying to help the team scout the next players.
Yeah, I mean, with Hans, like as I said, his stocks were so low. Like Misfits finished very badly, and we were thinking about replacing Woolite at that time. And I remember I said, I don't think Woolite is like any bad. I think he's a good player. But if we manage to get Hans Sama, I'm fine replacing him because I think Hans Sama is like really insane, and I think he's way better than every other player in the league. And if there is a choice, that's a no-brainer. I think Hans Sama is for sure a first choice. And then with top lane the situation, like I think we weren't happy with how Finn was playing, and we just wanted to make a change in the team. So we decided to change top laner, and also Odoamne was not on our list, but I always felt like he was very solid in the games, even when Schalke was losing. So as you said, like I went on his games and just saw like how he's doing in his matchups before 10 to 15 minutes. Like if he's getting any attention from his team, or is there attention from enemy team coming into his lane? Like how does he do 1v1? Like how is his CS? How is his like lane pressure? If he is like bleeding or stuff like that? And I felt like he was always in the solid position in his lane without getting any attention. So I was like, okay, this guy for sure knows what he's doing. Like there is no way in every single regular season game you never like got fucked by enemy team when you are playing on a weak team. Like surely you know what's going on. Like that's why I said he will be a good pickup for us.
I also feel like this is another reason that narrative of like it didn't work when Inspired and Larssen went. You also won the fucking MVP of the league playing with him. Like, guys, it obviously looked good. And in fact, one of the reasons when you're talking about Odoamne, when I think about it, it even makes sense why you would be the MVP in that particular lineup when Trymbi comes in and Odoamne comes in and comps there. Because if you think about it, right, Odoamne just played his whole career weak side, basically. Like you say, it doesn't demand loads of resources. Larssen just always CSs is on like a priority lane champion anyway half the game. And at this time, it's not like Hans Sam was there to demand all the like comps, like the rookie.
No,
anything,
Compos. I mean, Compos not there. It was still Hans. Comp joined when I left.
Oh, you're right.
France.
Yes, you're right. Actually, okay. Well, you had Hans Sam, but at this point in time, there's only one greedy lane there. Like, actually, it's a better lane if someone wants to be the farming jungler and have impact on the map, right?
Yeah, I mean, that was perfect. I mean, Odoamne knew his job, I think. He knew that he just needs to make the game solid for himself and not drag any attention to top. And that's what he was doing. I think he always had a good plan. Like, basically, when the game started, he already knew what he wants to do for the first 6 levels. And I didn't have that with Finn. With Finn was a little bit more of a freestyle. If he gets good trades, he will call people to go top. If he gets bad trades, he will need people to cover him. But with Odo, he just like knew his trade patterns, knew what's going to happen in the lane. And that's basically why it was easier to play with him.
By the way, before we skip to the really, really good lineup, obviously you did get to go to Worlds this first time. Now, true, in some ways, you guys, like, look, Mad Lions have definitely taken this mantle since then, but you guys also got flamed like fuck, just like Mad Lions did. Like, everyone's hating on you after this Worlds, saying it was like a wasted World spot or whatever. But if people go and look, you're not in like a fucking easy group. Like, pretty hard opponents. What was it like to go to Worlds the first time? I mean, if you said before early in your career, you know, you're thinking of like players you'd like to play. I mean, when you go to a Worlds, these are the absolute best players in the world. Like, these are massive names, right?
Yeah, it was very massive, and I was really like sad after the group draw when we got JDG and Damon. I was like, oh no, like I don't know. Looking at it right now, maybe I could have had more like hope, but when I saw the group draw, I was like so sad that I thought there is no way we will make it out. Playing on stage against those teams was actually like way easier than I expected it to be. Like in scrims, even against Asian teams, might be not breathable, but back then I think like the games were kind of close. I think if we played better mechanically, like we could have won. I think they were really cocky with their drafts, especially JDG. I think they did like Echo jungle with Sylas mid or something like that. Which if we played better, I think we could have won. So I think I had a little bit wrong mindset there. But it was a nice experience, like playing against Asian teams in scrims. That was like the biggest difference. I have never experienced that before that, and yeah, I learned a lot from playing against them.
Because one thing people might not know, because in their mind they're probably separating out Rogue from EG, but obviously your career was just one career, is, bro, every time you go to Worlds, you just play fucking Canyon for some reason in the group. Like, every time, you just draw this guy. Like, a lot of people obviously have this guy, maybe just mechanically, it's like, maybe he's the best jungler ever. What was he like to play against? You got quite a lot of games in against him, officials.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that he doesn't really make mistakes, so it's like hard to punish him. His laners are always doing really good, and he doesn't make mistakes. So what can I do as a jungler? I need to just like wait and look for the opportunities. But if he doesn't give me opportunities himself, I need to hope that some of their laners will either misplay or my laners will like beat them in lane and will be able to capitalize on that. But it was just hard. He was always where he needed to be, and he had Showmaker and Nuguri on his team that were always like doing really good in the game. So it was really hard to crack that team, because if they don't make mistakes, they play slow game, eventually we will just make a mistake and then they will snowball from that. So it's always hard to play against the teams that are not like super aggressive, but they are just solid and they're just waiting for you to make one mistake and then they just snowball off that.
And then similarly, look, that one literally was every Worlds. It was 3 in a row. But then you also had JDG, you had fucking Kanavi twice as well. So what is this player like? Because obviously people might know. I mean, I would even say, with that just as a guess, you maybe see some similarities in style. Like, he's kind of a carry jungler himself, right?
I mean, Kanavi is way faster than Canyon. I think Kanavi will like look for flippy invades, or he will look for some fights where he can try to outplay you mechanically. So I think playing against him was a bit more, you had to keep up really good mechanic level. If you make misplay, he will punish you. Right. I remember in the first game against them, actually at 2020 at that Worlds, they played like no, we played like a Blitzcrank comp, and we couldn't find any hook, and then we just slowly lost. Another game. What happened in another game? Yeah, he played the Echo Silas. Okay, that one they like really egoed on us, and you could say that it was actually his playstyle. They like lock in very weak champions on paper, but they just execute them very well, so they won the game. So playing against them had to be like always on top of your mechanics, make sure they can't outplay you. But it's pretty hard because they are used to playing like that. They basically every game they play in LPL, they play to fight and look for any skirmish they can take. So when someone comes that aggressive on you, you sometimes just click back and give them a bit more space than you should have.
One thing I actually wondered about is another thing people were probably shocked by if they watched that Crackdown episode is you don't just like say the name of an Asian jungler you thought was good. On this episode, people found out you were like a huge fan of SofM. If people remember at the time, obviously you went to the final 2020 Worlds with Suni, etc. But the way you described it though, it was obvious you actually had studied his game and like watched a bunch of the VODs and you're not just like watching on a second monitor, just, you know, while you're playing solo queue. Like, is this something about your game? You actually like study the top junglers? You actually like try to figure out what they're doing and do it more than just watching a fun match, you know?
Yeah, but like I felt like Kanavi was always making stuff that in my mind will not always work. That's why I didn't really like studying him too much. Canyon, I think, was just he was not making many plays. He was just not making mistakes. He was always there for his team, so his job was like kind of easier. For SofM, I felt like he was the guy that had to be a playmaker, but also find like good angles to make the plays. So what he was doing, I felt like is really reliable. Like you could actually replicate this stuff and put it in your own game. That's why I really like to watch him because yeah, it just felt like he was not taking risks but getting rewards. So he just was good at finding the angles where he can actually just walk in, get some advantage for his team and walk out. So I really respected that kind of play style, and that's why I was a big fan while he was playing.
Okay, you teased it before, but obviously I have to ask you about the LEC final in spring 2021 because you guys were up 2-0 and then even in game 5 there was sort of a big chance to win. So give me your take on it. What went wrong?
I mean, we hard choked. I think in game 3, like in my opinion, it was Larssen Odoamne choking in game 3. Like we had the 3-team fight. Hans was playing out of his mind the whole series. I think all 5 games he was playing out of his mind. Bot lane was winning every single game. All we had to do was just like support them and let them carry us, and we didn't manage to do that. I think in game 3 we had like a team fight on Drake when our support Karma top lane, like with full Moonstone Ardent stuff, like splitted from our 2 carries, and then we like land the Morgana binding on Wukong, and Larssen like ults him away and then jumps forward and dies. So we just like threw the 3rd game. I think 4th game we all didn't play too well and we just kind of got smashed. And game 5 we also had like a very big lead, and I will forever remember the play there. Like when we had Nash, it was like 25 minutes in. It was a mountain map. And Humanoid was playing Victor, and he was walking into the choke on like wolves with no flash. And I was like screaming in comms, "Yo guys, this guy has no flash, Victor no flash, Victor no flash." And for some reason, Odoamne on Renekton with flash up didn't go on him. He like went on the Kaiser that has cleanse and ult. Okay. And then we like all TP'd in and kept chasing, and we lost the fight. And our momentum just stopped there. I think the moment we like started throwing the game a little bit, and we already knew that we lost 2 previous games, and we kind of threw them as well. And now we are in the 5th game where we had lead, and we start throwing again. I think everyone's hands just kind of like froze, and we didn't really know exactly what to do. And I think Mad Lions just came out with the confidence in the end of the game 5, and that's why they won it. But yeah, I will always remember that moment when Humanoid is like walking into wolves with no flash, and I actually saw that there would be an angle to engage on him, but no one really followed me. And then funny, like I watched the voice comms of Mad Lions, and Humanoid is like saying, "Oh, I have no flash, I'm fucked." And then no one touched him. He's like, "Oh, right. I'm fine."
So even he thought he was going to die, right?
Yes. So it was so sad looking at it back. I feel like that moment we could have clutched that game 5 or like just finish it and we would have won. I felt like we were really a better team. I felt like that meta was perfect for me. We're playing Udyr, Hecarim every game and Lilia sometimes. I felt very confident on these three champions. It was probably my favorite meta ever to play. So I was really sad we didn't manage to win the split and go to MSI. I think it would help our team a lot in the confidence department. I think going to Summer would be way more confident, and we would have practiced at MSI against the international teams. I think it would just help the team overall in every aspect. It was very sad series to lose.
I mean, without making it too much of a ridiculous question, you might still be in the team now if you win this split, right? Maybe changes everything.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, who knows?
One thing I want to ask you is this, right? You were actually quite brave there. I mean, if people don't know, Inspired's just like a pretty blunt person. With like, you actually sort of picked the players who made the mistakes in that game. When you gave that example, usually what people do for PR reasons is, they do that thing like, well, we win as a team, we lose as a team, and, everyone tried their best. But here's the thing I want to get to, Inspired. It actually allows me to ask a question I normally can't ask people, which is normally people will just always make it like, no, we're all like friends, and, we didn't take the loss too hard. Dude, when you lose a match like that, where like pretty much every member of Rogue I've talked to thinks you should have won the game and everyone knows it was a throw and it was bad, right? It must be tricky after that not to sort of blame people or to think, well, that person fucked it up, or can I trust this person in a certain situation? Do doubts creep into your mind if you lose a match like that?
I mean, yeah, but like you don't really say like to the person face instantly, but looking at it back, like from back, everyone knew who made the mistake. I think surely there are some games where people will say that I made a mistake, and I agree with it fully. Like there were games, maybe not in that series, but some other series where I was the one making a crucial mistake, and it happens. I don't really feel bad if anyone will point it out. And right now, I think me pointing it out is like. I don't know, it's chill. I think the players themselves, if they get angry about it, they should just bring up the clip and watch it, and then they will be like, oh, okay, he was right. I mean, that mistake was a bit disgusting, and it happened. I mean, everyone makes mistakes, and if you point it out, I don't think it's like something bad to do. Like let's be real, like it's just a game. Like how again you get mad by getting pointed out you made a mistake? I think it's really weird.
This was obviously the year where, if people are remembering, this was the Rogue time year. The past ones, they used to just play scaling and sometimes lose because the other teams were better, like we've discussed. This was the year where there was that ridiculous thing where, like, it almost was like you could just look at the timer in game Inspired. It's like, they're doing awesome. Oh, shit, it's 19 minutes. Oh, fuck. And then the second it ticked to like 21 minutes. Like, oh, bloody hell. And then the joke is, it's like if you survive that next 10 minutes of Rogue time, then you win the game. You just win in the end when everyone's powered up. So, right, the reason I bring this up is, obviously everyone in Rogue's been asked this question, but I thought specifically for you, I actually feel like people do sort of low-key blame you specifically for this, because what they think is he's kind of a control jungler and he farms up, and this is the part of the game where they expect, I imagine, you're going to make some sick move or some play. Is that a misconception? What do you think the problem with Rogue time was?
I mean, for sure there was some problem, right? Like we didn't really feel as a team that it was like super big issue, and I still don't think so. I think it ended up that we threw some games because like we had a lead, and then we made some either too aggressive play by trying to go for tier 2 somewhere, and we like get TP'd on behind and we die, or maybe we're like doing the Drake somewhere and someone dies on side lane, and then enemies kind of get a little bit back into the game from that. I never really felt like it was that we're like excellent team and then we had problem in mid game because we couldn't snowball. I think that's if you have that kind of issue as a team, you should be happy. Like if you're managing to get lead every single game, and apparently your issue is to throw the game in mid-late game or like mid game 20 minutes, I think it's really easy fixable. I didn't feel like that was the case. Like sure, it happens sometimes, but it's not like that was the issue. I think we just had like sometimes too aggressive, sometimes our comms were not good and we're like splitting up and giving enemies angle. I think it can happen to any team, but the fact that it happens to us a few times, then people started picking up that narrative, and then with that they just went with the flow, and everyone said it's a Rogue time, and I found it kind of funny, so I didn't mind. I think it's a good narrative to have if the team is throwing games.
I also feel like there's a part that people aren't really being as fair if they think about the competition that this is happening against too. Because if you think about like the team that obviously beat you this year was Mad Lions, and the joke is they were the opposite. They used to be fucking terrible early game. They'd be behind like 7k, but then bizarrely in almost the exact same period with the Rogue time, they'd be amazing then and win in the mid game, and Kazi'd do some bonkers move and Humanoid would have some play. Like it seems like that team specifically was like a counter to your style, maybe.
I mean, they were for sure like never giving up. Even when they were behind, they still were thinking about like proactive plays on something they can find an opening at, and I think that was like biggest advantage. Like I think Armut was good at finding TPs. I think Humanoid really like to over push silent and make us put so much effort to stop him when he was behind. So he was always like giving a lot of breathing room to his team even when they were behind. Like he would legit just run side lane and we have to send 3 people to stop him because otherwise he will just keep pushing. And then in that time, maybe his teammates can find some opening while they are behind, like find engage on someone from us that is alone and get a little bit back into the game. I think they were pretty good at it, and that's why it was a little bit scary to play against them, because even though when you were ahead, you still had to keep a lot of focus to end the game, because they legit made you sweat to finish the game.
And obviously, this was the year when Elyoya came into the LEC and already showed that he was obviously a good jungler. The question I would have is this, Inspired. From being able to talk and do interviews with players from Mad Lions and even the coach, Mac, he even just told me straight up, mate, in that team, it was actually like designed so that Elyoya would be like the carry. Like even in team fights, supposedly, like the joke is like Kazi, even though he's the ADC, would just go in and then the idea was it was actually Elyoya who would clean up the fight. And they sort of like, it sounds like they just gave him all the resources he wanted and sort of put him in the position to succeed. Who is Elyoya to you? I know you only played him that year in Europe, but who is this guy to you?
I mean, the first time he joined, he wasn't like really impressive to me, but I mean, he for sure was solid. I think in the final against us, I didn't feel like he was that big of a threat, honestly. Like, I don't think he played like super excellent. I think the next split, he played way better. Like in the summer split, I think he was playing way better. Then when we played against the mid jungle duo, I actually felt a little bit scared because they were playing really aggressive and really well. But in the spring split, when they won against, like when they reverse swept us in the final, I felt like we just lost because we just decided to lose. Like I didn't feel like they were the ones making better plays or us or stuff like that. So I think in his first split, I mean, obviously going to the final in the first split and then he reverse swapped in it for sure means that he's a good player. But I just didn't feel that much pressure from in his rookie split. But the next split, I think he just got way more confident on the stage. He was playing more early game stuff, taking more fights, and then he truly shows that he's pretty good.
When you did win the MVP of the LEC, did you actually think that yourself? Did you think, I am the best player? I deserve this. I am the best player in the LEC.
Yeah, I mean, I said that I should have got MVP in the spring when we got reverse swept. I got second place in the MVP vote and Reckless got MVP. Yes. I still felt that I was like by far the best player in the league, like at that split. I think in the summer split, there was still the narrative coming around me that I should have been an MVP. That's why I got it. In summer split, I felt like I was playing good. If I wouldn't get MVP, I wouldn't really like argue with it too much. But I was arguing with it in the spring split when it was Hekari Mudir and I was legit like way better than every single jungler on these champs. And I was like carrying the games on my own, like pathing wise and my tempo in the early game. And Reckless managed to get the MVP, and we still like beat G2 release in the playoffs. So that was the split that I felt like, yeah, I was the best in the league. I should have gotten the MVP. But when I did get it, I was like, yeah, sure. I mean, nice. I finally got it. I didn't get it the split before when I for sure deserved it. But yeah, I still felt that I played very well, so I was happy. But our playoff run, that split when I got the MVP was really disaster. So that was a bit like embarrassing to get MVP, and then we didn't manage to perform well in playoffs at all. So yeah, that was a sad one.
Was Viego broken that year? Was it broken?
Yeah, it was really broken.
It was pretty good. That kill that you had to do on Misfits, that like Penta was fucking bonkers, wasn't it? Like it just, that made that like the joke is they should have just taken that clip alone and sent it to Riot, like nerf this champion. Like that's too good for a jungle champion, bro. That was insane.
Yeah, I mean the champion was so OP back then. Like he had so fast clear, very high damage in the early game. In teamfights, you always had to focus him first because if you trade kills 1-for-1 on anyone else, he will just pick up the reset and solo clean up the fight. I think that when the champion got designed, like it was so OP.
By the way, obviously the question to ask goes like this. I think part of the reason that all those narratives have been built up where people like blame you for things in Rogue, I mean, part of it's because they won later, but I also feel like part of the reason why is because you were the MVP, but then you leave the team. Like, it's pretty rare that the MVP leaves the team he's on. Like, that should be the main play you try and build around. Give us your take on it. What happened? Like, why is Inspired not playing in Rogue in 2022? Why go to LCS? And give me some thoughts. What happened?
I mean, basically, I wanted to try something fresh. Like I already played with Larssen for 5 splits, so I was like, "Yeah, we are good, but I want to play something else." Like it's getting boring for me playing with the same players all over and all over. So I wanted to have a new challenge, and I think I didn't have any option to join a new team because obviously I was still under contract with Rogue, and my buyout would be too big for any EU team to pay that. So I was looking for options in NA, and I got told by my friend that this kid Japan on EG is like very good, and even though I don't know anything about him, I should try playing with him. And apparently, he's like legit a new up and coming of NA mid lane, like the best player of the region. And I kind of trusted on it because the other players were really good. Like I had Impact and Vulcan, and I didn't really mind going to NA because it's like a new challenge for me. And I felt like if I keep my level and my like work ethic, I will be able to play. Even though people say if you go to this region, you are getting worse. But I thought that if I put my work, it will not really matter, and I think that's the case here. And yeah, I think I was just ready for a new challenge. That's why I was looking to leave Rogue.
I forget if it was Odoamne or Trymbi who told me this, but they told me, just like you said about the year before 2020 Worlds, they said that when you went to this 2021 Worlds, and obviously you got an even more ridiculous group draw. Like this time, if people don't remember, you got DAM1, who was like the number one team in the world. You got FPX, who was like considered maybe the best LPL team, even though they won the LPL. And then the other team was Cloud9, who was like the NA team, but obviously ended up actually in this group going fucking bonkers, even though people didn't accept. I've heard, just like in the 2021, I've heard basically even when you saw this group draw, you were like, oh, it's doomed. Like, fuck it, like it's over. Is it true?
Yeah, I was like that, but but it was more of a joking way. But
Okay.
I still felt like it's gonna be so hard group stage. But then when we started playing, and then FPX started choking against us, and then choking against Cloud9, it became very, very, very doable. But it ended up way worse than it should have been. Like if we lost to FPX and Damwon, I wouldn't really mind. But it ended up us playing against C9 for a tiebreaker. I mean,
Yes.
for a who gets out of group.
Yes.
And I felt like we played so bad that game. Like we were so scared to make mistakes in the mid to late game because we just didn't want to lose the game. That it just tilted me so hard. I remember after the series, like I was so tilted because we get out of Worlds by losing to an NA team that I think they didn't even do anything special, and we just didn't want to win the game. It just gave me the same vibe as it was in the final of LEC that we threw. Like it just felt like we were too nervous to finish out the game. So yeah, I mean, I will remember that one play there when we were like pretty ahead. I think I was Olaf with like really strong items, and I walk into the river and I just say like I'm gonna make Alistar combo me. Alistar like used combo on me, and then no one from my teammates went behind me to follow me. Like everyone was like playing a bit scared to not die. So we basically disengaged the fight and we didn't use the opportunity. And I was like so sad because I saw the angle there in my eyes to like win the game, legit clean up the enemies and win the game. But we didn't go for it, and then we just kept playing, and enemies found a better opening and they won the game. So I just like I was so sad that we didn't use that opportunity. And yeah, that's basically the saddest and the biggest memory from these worlds that I have.
When you were in Rogue in general, were you someone who actually like could, if you have like a jungle lead and you do what, can you call the game around yourself? Can you kind of be the shot caller, and do people listen to you and do what you ask?
Yeah, I mean they do, but I think it depends on the meta. I think the meta was really for a long time. I think since 2020, I think there was no meta where jungler could really lead the game. I think since that time, it's always either mid laners or bot laners that you play around,
Right.
and they kind of lead the game. But I think I'm good at playing the support style and just making sure everyone can do whatever they want. So I wouldn't say that I'm as people make up to be that I'm like player that only plays carries. I think I'm really, really good, and right now I think I might even be better at it than playing carries. At like playing the game controlled and making sure that everyone knows what their job is, and we just play slowly for drakes. Make sure my bot lane can push their advantage if they have a favorable matchup, and play from that. I think I got way better on it because my view on the game just changed. Like I understand more how bot lane needs to play the game. I understand more how mid lane needs to play the game in order to make it comfortable for them. So yeah, I wouldn't say that that like my playstyle is like only one way. I think I can play any way right now, and I prefer to play the supportive way because I think it's just stronger currently.
Obviously, at this Worlds, as you say, the big shock was how bad FPX was. Like, they really were supposed to be like a favourite for the tournament, where it's like, put it this way, the joke was, I think me and Monty even gave that like DWG award thing we do to like the hyped player. I think we gave it to Tian, mate, because obviously, like, he was like a Worlds MVP in the past years. He came into, mate, like, I know, like, if people don't watch the LPL, he actually was really sick in the LPL. I think he was even the MVP of the LPL that season. What do you think went wrong in his game in this group? Like, was he bad against you, do you think?
I mean, he wasn't bad, but first game he picked Lee Sin, and I think we just like locked in fiddlesticks and something like that, and our draft was just so much better, so we just won. I think they just got cheesed by us, that's why they lost first game. And I assume like how their mental had to be after losing to American team, then losing to European team, and then playing against European team in the tiebreaker to like get out, eliminated in group stage. Like for sure they were demoralized there, and I think Hans just played really aggressive in the game against them, in the tiebreaker game against them, and get us a big lead in the bot lane, and then they were playing full for top side. They got a little bit of a lead, but then they like threw some fight. So I could see that they were just mentally out of it. I think losing 2 games that they should have not lost, I think they just put them so like far behind in before even the game started that they just couldn't focus anymore. I think that was like the problem for them.
By the way, being as obviously Hans Sama went to LCS with you and he was on that Team Liquid super team that was like all like, if people don't know, it apparently cost like $7 million to make. It was like an enormous contract. I know you weren't in the team, but obviously as a teammate of his and you were in the league. Do you have any thoughts on what happened to him? Because if people remember, that year he kind of tanked his stock. But the funny thing is, I actually heard behind the scenes that even when he was coming to Europe, that actually people already were saying like, oh, it's the same thing as like Misfits. Like, oh, mate, he'll be sick when he comes back. Like, trust me, he's still good. What do you think happened to him in LCS as an outsider?
I mean, not even as an outsider, because I was talking to him, right? Like, he is like a very aggressive player, as everyone knows him to be. Like, he wants to win the game early game, and I think Thorin and Perkz were players that didn't like to play too fast. Like, I think Perkz is really good at making the game not losable. Like, he will just make it slow and steady, and then he will like play the game, and the team fights out. And it was pretty similar to Thorin. I didn't really feel like he was putting on too much pressure in the game, in the early game. And as I said before about Hans, if he's not in head in 15-20 minutes, he's not the same player. He just doesn't feel like he has agency in the game to do anything. So then he will like stop talking, because I mean, why would he talk if he can't really do much? He will just be there and catch the waves, and he doesn't play as good as he normally does. So I think that's why the team just didn't work too well together there, because Hans had the approach to play full for early game, and he wanted to win his lane, while his teammates wanted to just make the game stable and win in the mid to late game with like team fighting and maybe enemies making mistakes. But that's not the way Hans wanted it to play, and you could clearly see that in their games. I think they were always getting bot lead. I think their mid jungle was not really capitalizing on that, and then going into mid late game, especially against us, then it was just a star and was just scaring games. So I think the biggest difference was just a mismatch of how they like to play as a team.
Were you, before you joined DG, a little bit like what you're describing with the Hans Sama there? Because I also remember when we did the Crackdown episode, it seemed like you sort of almost described it like you really did think it was important, maybe just for jungle, I don't know, but to be like ahead in the early game, to figure out what you're going to do. And then you almost made it sound like you didn't think of like what it's like to be back and behind and to be playing from there. Were you always someone who tried to, like, having agency was the big deal? Would you agree?
For me, I think I'm fine playing both styles. I always adapt to the draft and what my teammates like to play. But Hans is not the player that likes to adapt. Like, he wants to make the draft as everyone sees. He likes to play Draven. He likes to play Kalista. He likes to play Varus. He likes to play champions that he can actually win lane with. Whenever he's put at the champions that he doesn't have agency in the lane and his job is just to survive and not bleed too much, he's not gonna be the same player. I think that's why. That's how he is. I think. Is it good or bad? I mean, I don't know. I think he's so good on the aggressive champions that why would it ever be bad? Just make the draft around him, make the whole team around him, and play around him. And I think that's why G2 is having a lot of success right now, because they basically took the support that he wanted to play with. They have the really strong mid jungle that is willing to play aggressive in the early game, and they just capitalize on his champions. And I think that's why G2 is working so well comparing to Liquid. Like, on Liquid, I think people didn't really play well around him. They didn't use him at all, and they were wondering why he's not performing on his level.
I've had to make a lot of tough choices in my career, but thanks to the support of my Patreon community, the Skrilluminati, I never have to make tough financial decisions. So this video and all the rest on my channel are kindly supported by Ahmed Haju, Frisky, Mac Pugnaccio Racula, Animosity, Jensen Gore, Tobias Bernasconi, Tosh, Toucan, and you know it if you've ever heard before, and you'll hear it many times in the future. A special thanks goes out to my main man, Journey Keys Minion. Do you want to ask a question in my video AMA? Do you want to be part of one of those long discussions where we talk about whatever you like in esports? Do you want teasers, find out who the upcoming guests are going to be? Or maybe you want to suggest a topic for a future Thorin's Thoughts type video? Well, if any of these perks or others appeal to you, put your money where your mouth is today and join the Skrilluminati by joining the Patreon link in the description box below.